we are going to have Representative Bennett introduce House Bill 5198 and 5192. They are both germane to the business of physical therapy. Representative Bennett, you have the floor. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. 5192 deals with limits of co-pays, co-insurance, office deductible for services of a physical therapist to the amount authorized for services of a primary care physician or an osteopath. Physical therapy allows you to heal quicker. Whether you've been in an accident or you have another affliction, they do a lot to help you recover. And the amount of money that people have to pay to go see them limits their use of the physical therapist. I have some physical therapists that will be testifying, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. I'll let them carry that. 5198 also is physical therapy, includes a practice of physical therapy in ordering diagnostic imaging, which is x-rays, to be performed by other healthcare professionals. What this bill does is allow you to get an x-ray from the physical therapist without him having to send you back to the doctor. If you're in physical therapy, you've already seen the doctor, he's ordered the physical therapy, and you're telling the physical therapy, you don't feel right, there's something wrong, and the therapist an x-ray. The doctor would read it, or the radiologist would read it, but it saves you a lot of time because he'd have to send you home, you'd have to call the doctor, you'd have to make an appointment, you'd have to go in and see the doctor. The doctor would say, well, we need an x-ray, and they take it from there. Like I said, I have that are physical therapists, so I will let them get in more depth. I would like to say that they cannot perform ultrasounds or MRIs. It's limited to x-rays. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Bennett, for your introduction. We're going to go to our virtual testimony. Hello, Mr. Ducette.
Yes.
Yes, how are you today? This is Representative Casey from the House Health and Human Services Committee. I have you online with us right now testifying on Representative Bennett's bills, House Bill 5192 and 5198. 5192 deals with the co-pays for physical therapy. 5198 is dealing with business and professionals, including physical therapy in the practice of in ordering diagnostic imaging. So if you would go ahead with your testimony, we would appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Representative Casey, and thank you, Representative Bennett, for introducing these bills on our behalf. I'm going to speak specifically on the imaging bill. I have a couple of other colleagues that will be up later that will speak more specifically on copay. Representative Bennett did a good job last week and again this week of kind of talking a little bit about some of the delays in the process of getting proper imaging for our patients. The one thing that he did leave out though is that currently physical therapists in Rhode Island are primary care providers and that we have direct access. So we often have patients that come to us first without ever having seen a physician before, and that's where the biggest gap lies. If I have a patient that comes to me who I determine through my evaluation requires imaging, the current process to get the patient that imaging right now requires somewhere between 5 and 6 steps and a minimum of 36 to 72 hours. And essentially what we're trying to do with this bill is just close that gap. As of right now, those extra visits require cost for copays and for doctor's visits for those patients, but more importantly, they cost the patient time, and most often that time is time where they're in pain, where they may reach out to other substances to try and reduce their pain. They're also potentially missing work. They are potentially not able to care for their families, their children. It's a gap in the system that doesn't need to be there based on physical therapist expertise. And We also have a lot of evidence that this model works. The U.S. military has been using a model where physical therapists order imaging for the last 40 years, and they've been researching it extensively in that time. Just last summer, they put out a study that looked at all encounters from 2015 to 2017 that supported all the data that came before it, and that is that physical therapists that work under advanced physical therapy practice, which includes ordering imaging, they provide safe care, they improve utilization, they actually decrease specialist referrals, like orthopedic referrals that are unnecessary. It lowers the overall number of imaging studies being ordered because of the accuracy of physical therapists determining when those studies need to be ordered. And most importantly, it shows that physical therapists ordering imaging improves patient outcomes, it increases patient satisfaction, and it significantly lowers healthcare costs. So I want to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to talk on this bill tonight. One more thing that I would like to have you guys consider. A week and a half ago, I believe it was Representative Speakman asked a question about why isn't this in place already, and I just want to address that for a second. My colleague Jen Harrell is going to speak a little bit more about how physical therapy education has changed since physical therapists got direct access about 30 years ago. But that is basically the reason that this wasn't in place, is that when physical therapists were granted direct access, their education was not at a level that this would have been a viable service that we could provide. And we've worked diligently over the last 25 years to increase the level of expertise that physical therapists can provide so that it matches up with the necessary requirements to be able to order studies like this. So again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen, and I would be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate your testimony. Are there any other questions right now from the committee for our witness? Okay, I have one. Greg, if you could you go through the scenario under current situation where you cannot order an X-ray? So let's say I'm in with you for physical therapy because my leg is sore, and you go through whatever machinations you need to make me feel better, and I don't. So you advise at this point that I need to get an X-ray. So what's the process currently for me as a patient? What do I have to do?
So even beyond that, you may present to me with leg soreness, and in the process of my evaluation, not even responding to your symptoms after seeing me for a couple of weeks. With physical therapists at primary care providers right now, we are required to be able to determine whether or not an initial encounter requires imaging. So it may be even beyond the scope of you being with me for a number of visits and not getting the response that we expect. But regardless of that, the process would be right now that if I determine that you need an X-ray, we would have to contact your primary care physician or another referring physician, orthopedic doctor, whatever that may be, typically get you a follow-up with that physician, which will require however many days it is to set up that follow-up. You would then follow up with that physician who at that appointment would order an X-ray. Then you would have to present at a different date or time to a facility that would provide you with that X-ray. After you get the X-ray, it has to go back to the primary care or the referring physician in order for them to be able to read and interpret that X-ray and then determine the next course of care, and they would communicate with me. We would work together to determine what that next course of care was. So essentially you're looking at a minimum 5-step process that in its absolute most efficient takes probably 2 to 3 days. I've seen it take as much as 2 to 3 weeks, which is the real problem that we have here, where we're really trying to close that gap, where people are in pain during this time. People are changing their lifestyles during this time. They're really limited functionally during this time. And the more that we can do to close that gap and increase the efficiency of that system will allow our patients to get better, faster, and return to their day-to-day lives and their function, making sure that they're not missing work, making sure that they can care for their loved ones, so on and so forth.
Okay, so if the nature of my work is very physical, then under this scenario, I'm going to be out of work for a period of anywhere from 3 days to maybe 3 weeks.
Absolutely, yeah. Potentially that's the case.
At the same time, experiencing the pain that I have. And then I would believe when I go to get an x-ray, I also have to have a copay as well.
Absolutely. Each one of those visits would incur a cost.
Okay. So I appreciate your testimony. I think everybody understands the scenario, and I'm sure that is one of a more simple one. Sometimes people who have back pain, they go through extreme amount of wait time to try and get to see somebody. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else that has a question at this time? Okay, Greg, we appreciate you appearing before us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time and have a great night.
Okay, we have our next witness, please. They have us on hold? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, hello. Who am I speaking to, please?
Hi, this is Jen Harrell.
Hello, Jennifer. This is Representative Casey with the House Health and Human Services Committee. I have you here to
Hi, Representative.
I have you here to testify on House Bill 5198 by Representative Bennett regarding including in the practice of physical therapy to allow a therapist to order an x-ray. If you would keep your testimony brief and to the point, we would appreciate it. You have our attention and you have the floor.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me here tonight. My name's Jennifer Harrell. I've been a physical therapist for the last 26 years. I practice primarily in the outpatient orthopedic setting down in Narragansett, Rhode Island. I've also been a physical therapy educator for the last 19 years. I'm here to provide testimony in favor of Bill 5198 that would allow physical therapists to order diagnostic imaging, more specifically radiographs or x-rays. So my colleague Greg just spoke about how the ability to order imaging would improve the quality of health care as well as save money for the patient and for the healthcare system. And I'd like to say a few words from the educational perspective. So as a profession, our physical therapy profession is using a very systematic approach to ensure that all doctor of physical therapy students, regardless of what school they receive their education at, have a comprehensive training about diagnostic imaging. So there's a couple of ways we're going about that. Number one, the Commission on Accreditation and Physical Therapy Education mandates that imaging content is included for all physical therapy educational programs. Secondly, the National Physical Therapy Board exam includes content on diagnostic imaging. And probably most importantly is that our professional association, the American Physical Therapy Association, recognizes that this issue is on the forefront of our professions, and our orthopedic section of the APTA formed a special interest group on diagnostic imaging. And this special interest group created an imaging educational manual, which is a highly detailed document. It's a roadmap of exactly what content should be included in DPT education. So it provides a structure for that education. It's not just that X number of hours need to be included, but it details the exact content. It includes the American College of Radiology Appropriateness Guidelines, which is the gold standard for ordering and making referrals for diagnostic imaging, regardless of which healthcare provider is doing the ordering. And I'll share with you briefly a study that was done back in 2013, which is the most recent data on this particular topic. It was a survey completed of all DPT programs, Doctor of Physical Therapy programs in the United States. And they found that an average of 24 hours was spent educating those students on diagnostic imaging. So my point in sharing this is that diagnostic imaging is not just a brief mention in physical therapy programs where they have an hour-long lecture on it. We spend 24 hours educating our students about diagnostic imaging. And of those 24 hours, 75% of them, on average, are focused on the musculoskeletal system, which is the primary system linked to the x-rays that the PTs would be ordering under this bill. And furthermore, 97% of DPT programs test their students to competence on this content. So rather than making an assumption or a hope that their students understood the content that they were being educated on, the students need to have a certain performance standard met, and that gives us an assurance of competence. So in summary, with this evidence, we conclude that physical therapists are well positioned from an educational standpoint to identify clinical situations where diagnostic imaging would be warranted. So I appreciate the opportunity to express my support for this bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. We appreciate your testimony. Are there any questions from the panel here? Anyone virtual? Okay, Jennifer, thank you very much for your testimony. We're going to move to our next witness.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
I'm sorry? Okay, we had a Lisa House on 5192. Thank you. We'll be joined in just a moment. Thank you. Hello, Lisa? Hello?
Hello?
Hello, Lisa?
Yes.
Hi, this is Representative Casey from the House Health and Human Services Committee. I have you here virtually with our committee. We are having you testify on House Bill 5192 by Representative Bennett. This is in regards to the amount of a copay limit for physical therapist services. If you would, please go ahead and keep your commentary brief and to the point. We would appreciate it. Go right ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Lisa House. I'm a licensed physical therapist here in Rhode Island, and I'd like to give you my perspective on House Bill 5192 as a provider. I've been working as a pediatric physical therapist in South County for the past 25 years, providing outpatient care for infants, young children, and teenagers. I'm currently working at Olympic Physical Therapy in Wakefield, treating children that are typically either impaired due to an orthopedic injury, neurological issue, or congenital diagnosis. These children have what I call developing bodies. Their growth plates aren't fused until 18 years of age. They're a vulnerable population at a very high risk for developmental problems that can lead to decline in functional ability into their adulthood if they don't receive proper care. Many times I've evaluated a child, and on the first visit, I've prescribed a treatment plan for them to receive PT 2 to 3 times a week for 6 to 8 weeks. Often their parent looks at me with sad eyes and asks me if it's okay if they can just come in once a week and do their exercises at home. They don't always tell me up front that it's because they can't afford the co-payments, but sometimes they do. Those that don't tell me they can't afford the physical therapy co-pays or to come, they either don't come back at all after that evaluation, or they come back for 2 visits and then they just disappear from my schedule. One child I evaluated came to me because he was walking on his toes and his legs were so tight, they were hurting him. He couldn't even stand on his feet stand up flat on the ground. He was 10 years old at the time, and he was always up on his toes. Kids were making fun of him. We worked together with a family-centered approach for about 10 visits when Mom said they couldn't continue with PT visits any further because they couldn't afford to keep coming. At that time, I issued a written home exercise program for that child and unfortunately had to discharge him from PT services at Mom's request, even though he had only met 40 to 50% of his goals. The same child returned to me for PT 2 years later, now at 12 years of age, and when I evaluated him this time, he was found to have worsening symptoms. He not only was still up on his toes, he now had knee pain. So he was worse than when I had seen him 2 years prior. His parents, of course, are trying to do the best they can for him, and as much as I've educated them, they followed through. The kid grows, and he goes through a growth spurt. So now here he is with an issue that he had a couple years ago, now worsening symptoms, trouble tripping. What he had gotten wasn't enough, and it didn't completely resolve his issues. He needed more manual work, and unfortunately the family could not afford to keep coming. So what I'm seeing is happening with these patients is that they're really not receiving timely and consistent enough care that they need so that their issues can be fully resolved. For financial reasons, many of them are becoming frequent flyers. I'll see them at 8, then I see them at 9, then I might see them at 11. And often it's not just one body part. It's the knee and the hip, or now it's their back because of something that happened with their feet. You know, everything's connected. The whole shin bone's connected to the knee bone story. And in the end, often these patients do end up needing more intrusive care, such as surgical interventions and bracing. They end up seeing multiple specialists from multiple different body parts. And unfortunately, it becomes just this downward spiral into adulthood. The patients are becoming more limited with these less desired outcomes for issues that I really feel could have been more readily resolved had they had better access to their physical therapy. I believe that there is remedy in House Bill 9152, and I would like to see this bill approved so that patients can have better access to the care that's being prescribed for them for physical therapy without such a huge financial strain. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak tonight, and please let me know if there are any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now that will close the hearing on House Bill 5192. And, I'm sorry? You do have one more? Okay, go right ahead. I'm sorry, she wasn't on my list, but thank you very much. We don't want to miss anyone. Hello?
Hello,
Yes,
Chairman, this is Michelle Cole.
Hi, Michelle. How are you? Thank you for appearing with us today. You're testifying on both bills or just regarding the copay?
You know, I'll focus, I think you've heard good testimony in regard to the imaging bill, so I'm going to focus on the copay bill on Bill 5192.
Go right ahead. Thank you very much.
All right, my name is Michelle Colley. I am a physical therapist. I am also the president of the American Physical Therapy Association, our Rhode Island chapter. It represents over 500 physical therapists, students, and assistants. And I'm also the CEO of Performance Physical Therapy, a multi-clinic practice that employs approximately 80 PTs. So physical therapy is my life, and, you know, it's interesting just to give you a sort of a quick overview of physical therapy is, you know, we see a lot of people with things like back pain and help to prevent people with back pain ending up with taking opioids and narcotics and needing more invasive treatments. We manage people with OA, and the research shows that we can help to minimize the need for people with osteoarthritis to have surgeries and other interventions. We'll see people with simple sprained ankles. And really their big thing with most of our patients is it's not just helping that sprained ankle, it's helping to get people to move and reduce the incidence of chronic diseases, obesity, arthritis, hypertension, those things. So what I'm trying to point out is that PTs, we really are primary care providers when it comes to musculoskeletal care. It's pretty basic care that we're providing just to keep our community healthy. But unfortunately, the insurance companies, the payments, have classified us as specialists. And by doing that, it means that co-payments, co-insurance deductibles are at a specialist level,
and that's resulting in a challenge with regard to access to care. So we've done some math, 30% of our patients are unable to complete their care or even at times come to physical therapy because of things like the $30 copayment. When people come to physical therapy, they tend to come on average, and this is a very broad average, of 9 to 10 visits. And when it's a $30 copayment or sometimes more plus a deductible, it's just not an accessible point for many people, especially in today's economy. So we're really looking for this fair copayment bill is really about changing insurance companies' classification, thinking of us as the primary care provider rather than a specialist, so that the co-payments and co-insurance can be at a level that ensures patients have access to care. I'd be happy to take any questions and help with any other further explanations.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Do we have any questions? Okay, do you have anything to add for us? Okay. Michelle, thank you very much for your testimony. We're going to move on. That will actually conclude the testimony for House Bill 5192 and House Bill 5198 by Representative Bennett.